Viewers, you don't know who the cameraman is.
No
You
one.
don't know why you're being made to see these things. Nor do I. You're seeing me. I can't even see you. I may be dead by the time you watch this. Very possibly are. You don't know who's the man who's making things he wants you to see. Destroy your television sets. Now. You must listen to no orders. That's all I can tell you for this point in humanity.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
I can already hear the chorus of execration. How dare I say such a horrible thing? How dare I stir up trouble and inflame feelings by repeating such a conversation? My answer is that I do not have the right not to do so.
Perhaps we need some outside universal threat. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
At this point in time, Europe has not yet learned how to be multicultural. And I think we're going to be part of the throes of that transformation, which must take place. Europe is not going to be the monolithic societies that they once were in the last century. Jews are going to be at the center of that. It's a huge transformation for Europe to make. They are now going into a multicultural mode, and Jews will be resented because of our leading role. But without that leading role and without that transformation, Europe will not survive.
And yet I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
Those whom the gods wish to destroy, they first make mad. We must be mad. Literally mad as a nation.
Force is more effective than voting. Elections change nothing. Rioting, by contrast, makes you rich and powerful. When you riot, prosecutors will ignore the law on your behalf. Corporations will send you millions. Politicians will kneel down before you. It works. Violence works.
Hello, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, and it sounds like you're alive and doing well.
I'm borderline. I've got a bad case of the coof.
You actually think it's Kufid?
It might be coofid.
Well, I hope that,
I have my Halls, though. I got my cough drops, my coof drops.
certainly sounds like something's rustling over there.
Yeah. I've been munching on these for the past couple days.
They really do work. The way that they kind of coat your throat with something that makes it feel better is just incredible. I'm always surprised at just how efficacious they really are. But it's good that you're in tip-top shape.
Yeah, I'm in tip-top shape. As tip-top as can be right now.
Well, I guess World War III is popping off.
Supposedly. I haven't seen anybody else reporting on it. Really?
Well,
I've seen RT. I've seen RT reporting on it. I keep refreshing Drudge Report. Drudge Report is kind of... They're missing the mark these days. Matt Drudge over there, homosexual man of the Jewish faith, is really missing the mark these days. But, yeah, he doesn't have anything on it. All I know is what I see in Telegram.
I heard that Drudge is now just totally gay, and like he abandoned Trump and everything.
He's always been totally gay, but now he's more gay than normal.
Oh, I see. Well, the reason I actually brought it up is because I saw you sharing it, and I was like, oh, this looks huge. So maybe it's a nothing burger, but maybe it's not though, because I see all these people are talking about like it's another Turkish-Russia proxy war, and a lot of people. There was something you posted where it's like, yeah, from this Rajip Soylu guy, some Turk, talking about different proxy wars between Turkey and Russia. And he says, and I'm quoting him here, he says, and there are folks out there who have presented Turkey and Russia as allies against NATO just because Turkey has made some tactical decisions in Syria and with S-400s. And it's like, to the best of my knowledge, Turkey is part of NATO.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I don't know what that guy was going for, but
and that entire region is a total clusterfuck. Like, there's not a clear alignment of powers. I think we've been over this before. But
Yeah.
Turkey, Iran, Syria, Saudi Arabia, other Gulf states, Egypt, Israel, Russia, all these places, India, Pakistan, this entire kind of continuum of land that runs from the Eastern Mediterranean across to the Indian subcontinent. It's just a hodgepodge of regional powers, and none of them are aligned together 100%. So I thought maybe this is going to be World War III, because it sounded kind of like maybe Turkey and Russia were going to fight over this kind of dispute. Maybe that's not actually going to wind up happening.
I don't know
but
why Russia doesn't just like steamroll into Turkey. And
because of NATO.
Well, nobody cares about Turkey, though, okay? I don't actually think NATO would get involved in a hot war with Russia over Turkey. Nobody
but
likes
think about
Turkey.
this.
Turkey is literally the worst NATO ally.
I kind of like Turkey. But
What? Okay.
yeah, I do like Turkey because they're based. Because Erdogan is epic, and like, I mean, I don't like that he's flooding Europe with migrants, and I don't like that he's turning churches into mosques, and he's re-Islamifying the country. But at the same time, I kind of do, because that's exactly what I would do if I was a Turk. If I was a Turkish leader. So I'm thinking in a non-white mentality here. I'm thinking in a pro-Turkish mentality. What am I going to want to do? I'm going to want to revive the religious element of the society. I'm going to want to revive national glory, these things. And that's what he's described as. He's described as a neo-Ottoman. So he's flooding Europe with migrants.
If you were a Turk and you were Islamic, then yeah, I'm sure you would love Erdogan. He is based, but yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't say I like him. I should say I respect him. That's maybe a better word.
Sure, yeah.
The thing with Turkey, though, is that, okay, so if Russia thinks to themselves that NATO is not going to attack if Turkey and Russia get into a scrap, well, that actually dissolves NATO, and that moves all the Russian chess pieces on the board further into Europe. Because if they know that they're not, like, if they're able to demonstrate with Turkey that NATO is nothing, then that will give them a strategic advantage when it comes to Eastern Europe. Because they'll feel like they'll be able to move. They'll demonstrate the weakness of NATO, and they'll set a precedent for NATO not honoring its contracts, and they'll feel like they can move closer into Europe, like the Baltics, for example, the Baltics and Poland. That's not even Western Europe. That's just reestablishing its old sphere of influence. And I feel like if they can get away with it in Turkey, they certainly might be able to get away with it in Eastern Europe, because that's historically been their domain anyway. It'd be different if they started, launching paratroopers into Paris or something. But if they're saying, well, we're gonna exert our influence in the Baltics, which used to be part of our empire, and the Soviet Union and Poland and stuff, they would have a stronger case like that. And also, it would be kind of a case of frog boiling, where Russia is escalating tensions, and they started with Turkey. No one does anything over Turkey, and now everyone's kind of got used to that sort of paradigm. And people think to themselves, they start talking to themselves about, do we really want to go to war with Russia over Turkey or these types of places? And before they know it, people have said, no, we don't want to. They get used to what Russia's doing. And then Russia's in the Baltics and Russia's in Poland. And people are like, well, we still don't want to go to war with Russia. So I think that if there was no response from NATO, it would definitely embolden Russia. But I'm actually not even really opposed to that. NATO is gay. I don't even know why I'm talking about this, like as if Russia's some kind of threat. NATO is gay. If I was president of the United States right now, I am going to run for president of the United States. I'm not a natural born citizen, but I intend to write like this long. I'm gonna run for Congress from Michigan's 1st congressional district, and I'm gonna win because I have won elections before. I won a student election in 8th grade, so that means that I'm qualified and able.
Epic, yeah.
And no, but I own the shit out of that student election. I'll tell you about that later if I haven't already. I think I have, but I'm gonna win that, and then I'm going to I'm gonna hire all the best lawyers in the entire country, the ones with the biggest noses. I'm gonna get lawyers and pay for them to have reverse rhinoplasties to enlarge their noses, so they can inhale the legal ability from the air from passing other lawyers. They can just sniff and inhale that ability directly into their brains. So we're going with reverse rhinoplasties, and we're legally changing all their names to Bergs and Steins, so that I will have the best chance of having this succeed. So I'm going to write about the intent of the founders and how Canada and all of these places in British North America were pre-approved for acceptance into the Union, and how I had ancestors who lived in the Americas, and some of them were patriots, and all these things. And I'm going to talk about how all that's justified, and it's going to be hundreds of pages, and I'm going to ram it through the Congress, and I'm going to change it such that naturalized citizens hopefully with the caveat that they come from the Anglosphere or something, are able and capable of running for office and being elected to office. And it's going to work. It's going to be based. And I'm going to run for president, and I'm going to run on a platform of open strategic alliance with Russia. Because think about this. Why do we need to be... I thought about this back during the 2015, 2016 election. I thought, like Trump was saying, why don't we want to have good relations with Russia? And it's so true. It's like, why do we want to have bad relations with Russia? They're not communist anymore. Russia, now don't get me wrong, Russia has its problems, and Russia pits its ultranationalists against its sort of revanchist neo-Stalinists and Marxist-Leninists. But by and large, they actually are a socially conservative country, and they are not communist anymore. And they do not, there's a perception that they get along with China, and it's not really true. They're kind of forced into that sort of alignment based on the American world order. But if you just run on an open working with Russia and actually playing into Russian fears of Chinese expansion and Chinese power, that would be amazing. That would be so good. We don't need to be enemies with Russia. Okay, great, Russia. You can have influence in Belarus and the Ukraine, which are the same fucking country as Russia anyway. I don't care about Ukrainian nationalists who say, "Oh, my Ukraine, Kiev and all this." So shut the fuck up, Ukrainian. Okay, you're gonna be part of Russia again, and that's not up for debate. I literally cannot stand those people.
Do you think the future of Eastern Europe looks a lot like Ukraine right now? A proxy war between Russia and NATO?
No, because I'm going to be president and I'm going to dissolve NATO. We're pulling all the troops out of West Germany. We're pulling all the troops out of England. We're pulling all the troops out of everywhere. And that's going to happen. Like, I'm just kind of using myself as a surrogate here as an example. That's going to become more and more popular because people like Russia used to be the big enemy, and now it's China. American conservatives, they actually like Russia. When Donald Trump said, "Russia, if you're listening, we need these emails," like that had strong SHAEF overtones. And by SHAEF, I mean like Strategic Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, I think from World War II. And you had all this like supranational Canada, U.S., Great Britain, Soviet Union working together in World War II. And you had this hodgepodge of units and intelligence sharing. And I think that's kind of what people are yearning for, because we're fighting demonic entities. We're fighting child molesters. We're fighting Satanism. And in this struggle of moral good versus moral evil, people are looking to countries like Russia, which nowadays are perceived as being, very moral, with like people are looking for that to kind of offset this evil, this rot in Washington, D.C., which literally has pentagrams built into the roads. Like the roads are designed as pentagrams. So it's very evil, very satanic. But I think that we need to see a realignment with Russia and the United States against China. So China, right now, they don't have a blue water navy. They have kind of a brown water navy or a green water navy. And they're not super able to project power worldwide. So they're in the realignment. America uses its blue water navy. You just pull it out of the Atlantic, because with Russia gone, there's no Atlantic really threat. You can maybe leave a token Coast Guard cutters off the coast of the United States, and that's it. You move the rest of the fleet into the Pacific Ocean, and you guard against China's desire to expand into the Pacific. So that's one aspect of checking. The other aspect is Russia, which shares a land border with China. So you say to Russia, look, you no longer need to prioritize anything in Eastern Europe. We'll let you have Belarus. We'll let you have the Ukraine. Hell, I'm half Lithuanian, and I'd say, okay, Baltics get reintegrated into the Russian neo sort of non-empire. Fine, I don't care. I don't give a shit. Whatever. Russia will give Eastern Europe, and we'll have good relations between Russia and Western Europe, because Russia doesn't want Western Europe. They want Eastern Europe. They want their sphere of influence. And if we de-escalate there, I think things will go smoothly, and they can refocus their attention on taking things back away from China. Because right now they're only dealing with China because they feel like they have no real choice, and it's a tenuous thing. China and Russia have been at each other's throats for a long time. In imperial times and even during communist times, there was the big Sino-Soviet split, and they were not friends and not allies. So there is ample ground for us to work together. This Russian nemesis narrative is an anachronistic holdover from the Cold War, and it needs to go. It's dangerous, and it's pointless, and it's stupid. We need to ally with Russia against the Middle East, and we need to ally with Russia against China. And that's my opinion on the situation.
Yeah, the Russia-Chinese relationship is entirely cynical, and they only do it to get around the United States. I don't think it's entirely clear that China needs a blue water navy to project political power. I don't think they're afraid of our navy. What they're doing is they're buying up trade ports everywhere, and they're perfectly capable of projecting political power with economic threats. They do this in Australia. They do this all across the southern Pacific and in Africa.
Yeah.
And they do this with minimal military presence in those locations.
Well, I'm not
So
entirely
it's
sure how to
difficult
counter
to say
that.
how to respond to that, other than promoting economic nationalism in these nations that China is trying to infiltrate economically. It's not entirely clear how we combat that militarily.
I think, honestly, the best thing to do is to pull out of the Outer Space Treaty or whatever it is called that says you can't have nuclear weapons in space. I would direct, if I was president of the United States, I would direct my agencies, my military agencies, the companies that I'm contracted with, I would say, look, we're putting rockets in space, and they're going to have nuclear-tipped warheads, and I also want conventional weapons in there. I want rods from God. I want kinetic kill vehicles that are able to be dropped from orbit. And I'm going to put that in motion, and then the day before they're scheduled to launch, I'm going to pull out of the nuclear treaty, and then I'm just going to launch them all into space. And then I'm going to put them in geosynchronous orbit over China and say, you suck my fucking cock, or I will nuke Beijing, I will nuke Wuhan, I will nuke Hong Kong, I will destroy you, I will turn you, and I will say to them, there's nothing I would love to do more than to turn your fucking shithole country into irradiated glass. Like, it's like, back the fuck off. That's what I would do, because China, you have to deal with them tough. There's billions and billions of them, billions and billions of Chinese, and it's insane. And they're taking over the world, and people have no spine. So in the West, that's what we do. We have the nukes pointed at their capital city, and I say, you make a fucking move, we see everything that you do. You make a fucking move, and there will be hell to pay. And then we use eminent domain in places in the West, and we seize all the Chinese assets, and we just go full Lenin. Sorry, we're just seizing all your property. Private property? Yeah, I thought you were communist, China. So the workers of America are taking back your property. There's going to be no dual loyalty. We're expanding the coronavirus ban. I'm going to dredge that up from wherever it's gone by the time I become president, and I'm gonna expand that to general dual loyalty. We'll kill two birds with one stone. We'll kill Israeli influence in the United States and Chinese influence. No more students are coming over from China to study. No more of this Xi Jinping's daughter is coming over. That's not happening anymore. Everyone is gone. They're out of here. Bye-bye. And yeah, we're just taking it back from China. All you need is a spine and some political will. Because China has power. They have the ability to project, but they do that because the West is lax. They're not doing it based on their own power. They're doing it because the West is letting them get away with it. And that's not happening anymore. We're putting nukes. We're aiming them at Beijing. We're aiming them at Shanghai. We're aiming them at Changchun. And we're just crippling them. We are destroying them forever.
I think that's part of the goal of the Space Force, is to counter Chinese power in orbit. I think the Chinese are already weaponizing their satellites, and the creation of the Space Force is just a way to it's the United States response without divulging to the public that China has, I don't know, possibly weapons of mass destruction in orbit.
Yeah, China doesn't care about anything. China just cares about success, which I respect.
I wonder if there's already a sort of war going on with China in orbit. I wonder if we have satellites shooting each other down.
It's possible. It's definitely possible, because
I mean, they're lasering the West Coast right now with weaponized satellites. They're setting fires in California, supposedly. And I mean, there's obviously bad actors that wish to sabotage the United States in some way coming from China. I mean, do you remember the whole scandal that was going on in like June, July with the mystery seeds from China?
No, what's this?
So thousands of farmers across the United States were reporting to the Department of Agriculture that they were receiving mystery seeds with Mandarin written on the packaging from China, and some of them were labeled like cabbage and stuff like that. Vice did a report on this. They did some real journalism for once. But basically what they found out, this became a big thing, like at the state level and then at the national level. The FDA was saying, hey, please don't plant these seeds that you're receiving from China, and destroy them if you can, like throw them in the oven, put them in a Ziploc bag, suffocate them in a Ziploc bag, pour bleach on them, stuff like that. Get rid of these seeds. We don't know what they are, but some people planted them. In fact, thousands of people planted them.
To do that?
Well, they were coming from Amazon, and people just automatically trust packages they receive from Amazon, I guess. So people were planting these seeds, and it's just weeds. It's just weeds, like mislabeled weeds, destroying people's gardens. So it's like, now we have Chinese people waging bio-warfare against American farmers by sending them mystery seeds to destroy their crops and stuff like that. Like, there's stuff going on between China and the United States, and I don't know. It's very mysterious. It's very strange.
Yeah, I don't think that China is going to wage a Cold War against the United States in the same way that the Soviet Union did. I don't think that's going to happen at all. I think China has the potential to be much more violent and much more ruthless. They're just insects. They don't care. They just see what they want and they go for it. And they don't care about the consequences. They don't care what kind of resources they have to muster. It's terrifying. China represents an absolutely existential threat in a way that the Soviet Union just did not. The Soviet Union had nukes and they had a large army, and that sounds scary, and it is. And the world.
Look, at the end of the day, the Cold War between Russia and the United States and the Eastern Europe versus Western Europe, that was an inter-European civil war kind of deal. So there was no existential threat to white Western civilization during the Cold War. Either the United States or the Russians would continue, but at the end of the day, our genetic cousins would still own the future. But with China, it's like, if they win, that's it for us. China's an existential threat in a way that Russia isn't, just because of genetics.
The only way Russia would have absolutely destroyed us is obviously through mutually assured destruction. If the nukes started flying and the entire planet was destroyed. But other than that, I think that you're right. And I think that this actually manifests. I think this it highlights the folly of Marxism-Leninism. Don't get me wrong. Obviously, Marx and Lenin had their points, but neither of us are Marxists or Leninists. So I think it actually highlights the folly of Marxism-Leninism that the differences between these countries were supposed to just sort of melt away. And a decade after communist revolution in China, there was the Sino-Soviet split, which never healed. The differences were immediate and permanent. And I totally agree with you. I think China represents a dangerous existential threat. They totally lack morals. They totally lack scruples. They have resources and willpower that just are frightening. They need to be kept in check, and not just economically. They need to be crippled. They need to be absolutely destroyed. They need to be eliminated. And I don't know whether that means we need to, invading China would be so difficult. It's not practical. And dumping that many nukes onto that part of the world, that would cause a lot of environmental damage. So I'm not saying we need to totally expunge the world of Chinese people, but something about that part of the world has to be done. Whether that's just basically imprisoning them in their own country under constant threat of nuclear bombardment, or I really don't know. Honestly, I feel like
the system is serious. I think if the system is serious about taking out China as a threat to them, the future of warfare is one of bioweapons, not unlike what COVID might have been.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, I think genetically, the bioweapons that target specific genetic groups, I think that's what the future of warfare looks like. And it'll never be admitted. We'll just have, every 5 years, it'll be a new pandemic of something from China, and then there will be a pandemic in China of something from the United States, and it'll be bio-warfare between the neoliberal Western world and the I don't want to call it communist, but the Chinese East, and they'll never admit it, and we'll just be locked down for all eternity while this bio warfare World War III takes place in secret. And I don't know, it is 21st century dystopia.
Yeah, it is pretty horrifying. It is pretty scary. And I don't know what the solution is, because is that seriously what it's going to be? It's going to be tit for tat forever, trading bugs and trading weeds. That's I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if we're headed for a confrontation or if we're headed for something that's kind of low level like that. Because if so, I feel like people may get fed up with the American system too, because it'll look like China always has the advantage. China does something, and America has to respond. And the news will keep coming out of China of these militaristic style responses to disease outbreaks and to pandemics and things that happen that way. When you look back at what happened at first with COVID, you see this military style response from the Chinese state where they're welding people into their apartments. Everything is shut down. They shut down cities that have like 12 million people living in them, and they just do it on a whim. And they build hospitals out of nothing.
There was a
people will see
where
that
like 200 million people were locked down all at once. These are numbers that we can't conceive of. Like,
yeah,
it's insane.
People were going to get tired of the liberal response, because China, as much as people dislike China, I think that people on some level, even if they don't like it, they're somewhat awed by the ability of the Chinese state to respond to emergencies like this. And with in the United States, you have all these states' rights, you have these different parties, you have all this stuff that goes on, and it leads to a chaotic, disjointed response with no unity, which makes people feel anxious. And I mean, at first you get your libertarians, and they just want to be left alone, and they say any state response is negative. But even them, as time goes on, I think they're going to see the Chinese efficiency at responding to things, and people are just going to say, if we don't adopt this sort of mentality, we're going to be screwed. We're going to be destroyed, because China will just be able to outmaneuver us. Or if we're not going to be outright destroyed, we're going to exist on a lower level of quality of life, because our response is just going to be hampered in perpetuity, and people are going to, I think, clamor for.
I mean, that's exactly what the system wants. Frankly, is you have Bill Gates and Dr. Fauci out in the media praising the Chinese response and saying, I think it'll get a lot worse over here in the Western world because we're too individualistic and we want too much freedom. And if we could just, if we could temporarily suspend certain privileges to the citizens, then this pandemic could be over with much quicker. That's what they've been saying, but that's what they want the future to look like. And I mean, they have the ability to produce these bioweapons, and that would be the sensible response, would be to give the government more power to tell people to stay in their homes and produce a system that looks something more like the Chinese system, which would be playing right into their hands. But frankly, there's not really another option besides, I don't know, half the population dying of some bioweapon over the course of the next 50 years.
Yeah, it's just a matter of who's going to hold the reins of power. It's not the issue is not that there are elites in the country. The issue is who those elites are and what they're doing with their power. That's always been the problem. It's like my problem with the Soviet Union, my problem with communist China is not the size of their state, apparatuses. It's not the size of their militaries. It's not the size of the government. It's the ideology that governs the motion of the state. It's the ideology of the people in charge and to what end they're going for things. In the Soviet Union, at least there's no way to get rich. In the Soviet Union, at least it was just a misguided ideology that everything was orbiting around and rallying around. In the West, on the other hand, you've got these disgusting Democrat insiders and these Republican sellout shills that are totally beholden to big business. And it's it really, when the communists criticize us as being, like, when they criticize fascism and they criticize kind of the union of the synthesis of corporations with the state, they have a point, kind of, because in the West the sort of control that they're going for is semi-fascistic, but it's kind of like gay. It's like fascism with AIDS. It's not. Yeah. It's not oriented towards any higher spiritual goal, which is, of course, a necessary and crucial component to us. The health of the nation, the health of the state, the health of the people, these are given and taken for granted in our conception of what fascism is and what fascism should be. But in a system that's divorced from those ideals and instead replaces them with something demonic, then you get sort of a gay imitation of fascism, where it's the same corporate state epic handshake alliance, but instead of being epic, it's totally cringe, and they're just enforcing all this gay stuff on you. It's
just Luciferianism. It's just scientific technological dictatorship is what it is.
It's like when I said I don't have anything against the large state of or I don't have anything about. I don't have anything against the bureaucracies and then the apparatuses of the state of China and the Soviet Union. That's related to the thought where I said what we have now is kind of like gay version of fascism. It's two sides of the same coin. There's something redemptive about the state of communism, except for the fact that it's communist, and there's something that's not guaranteed about fascism just because it's fascist. There's two sides of the same coin there. It's like, I'm not apologizing for Marxism-Leninism. I think it's a trash system. I think it's garbage. I would never, approve of the Soviet Union. But we do have to be mindful that we don't get what we want, but with everything inverted. I don't want to live in the gay Reich, where everything is controlled by these corporations that are in league with the state, but they're enforcing all the wrong ideals. The ideals are the main portion of it. That's like kind of what Nick said. He said he doesn't care if he had 1,000 years of Bernie Sanders' economic system, so long as everything else was okay. He says he doesn't approve of Bernie Sanders because of his social ideas. You know what I mean? But he said if he had to make a compromise, he had to live with Bernie Sanders' economic ideas, but all the social policies were good, that would be totally acceptable. And in large part, I would agree. And that's kind of what we have to have the social ideals first, and then we have to build a system around it, because we don't want power to concentrate in the hands of these demonic entities who are who make up the body of the political establishment and the economic establishment. So we have to be wary of that.
Well, I've been getting a little deeper this past week, and I plan to make myself more knowledgeable on the topic, but I've been getting a little deeper into how far back the whole Freemasonic infiltration of Western power has gone, and it's kind of black-pilled me on the nature of power, to be honest. I'm no longer 100% certain that having an all-powerful government, as long as you have the right people in charge, is an ideal system. Maybe it's just my American genetics rising up and telling me not to trust the European aristocrats, but I'm starting to feel like I kind of just want to be left alone at this point.
The total Alex Jones pill?
Yeah, the total Alex Jones pill.
I mean,
I just want the secret technology that the U.S. military is hiding from us with superluminal travel. I want that to be released, and gravity drives. I want all that stuff to be released to me, and then give me one of these anti-gravity spacecraft, and I can go be a libertarian in another solar system. Like, give me the infinite space frontier, and that's the ideal system. Is just me being away from here, without the government, in space. That's my ideology, folks.
Well, I know you mentioned Freemasonry. What does that have to do with this change of heart?
Well, I wonder if just being in power makes you feel like you deserve. So what Freemasonry is all about, preserving esoteric knowledge and keeping it out of the hands of regular people, and giving it only to people who they determine to be deserving of that knowledge. And I wonder to what extent that a desire to be a part of something like that is inherent psychologically in people who have power. And I wonder if that lends itself more to abusive behavior, and a feeling that not only are you superior to your subjects, but also that you have the right to display that superiority by, well, abusing your people, and just like being greedy and stealing their stuff. Maybe the libertarians aren't totally cringe when they say that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yeah, but the problem is that dynamic is still, in effect, is still in force when the power transitions from the elite down to the lower classes. That power is still corrupt. Power still has the ability to corrupt. I guess you would just say that because everybody now has it, that everyone is sort of checked by everyone else. But at the same time, is that I would totally reject the paradigm, because I do think that there's a hierarchical, aristocratic organization to nature. So when you have the lower classes, when you have the lower people, when you have them sort of fleecing and taking away the right to administrate from the upper classes, that's just the identical form. That's an identical form of theft. It's sort of why I have a problem with the idea of the revolution in the first place, like a communist revolution, is that people in the lower classes, is that they literally don't have a right to do that. And that sounds very snobby. It sounds like, I have this conception of myself as being a higher being or whatever. I'm not saying me, because I don't imagine to be an aristocrat. Like I've got my vices. I'm addicted to junk food. I'm addicted to a whole lot of other things. Mm-hmm. And it's I'm not pretending to be one of these aristocrats, but I think that people, it's the same selfish desire for power, but you're looking at it through rose-tinted glasses, because you see someone who's a dirty peasant and you think, oh well, he's good because he works hard and he's poor. But that's not really the case. It's like the lower classes, they are not. I don't think that there's anything inherently good about them. I don't think there's anything inherently good either about the upper classes. I just think that the responsibilities are different. And this idea of I'm going to take what's out there and give it to myself, I think that's just as much theft. I think that's just as wrong in a way. And I don't think, because people at the end of the day, we're not libertarian animals. We are social animals that belong in a social tribe. We belong in a collective, and you empower the lower people. And if you say libertarian, well, what does that mean? If you're going to say libertarian and actually mean what the dictionary definition means, well, that means that people have the right to do things that are unhealthy to themselves. They have a right to eat bad food. They have a right to do sexually deviant things, like be a homosexual, do these terrible things. And the issue, of course, is that mentally that begins to wear on you, even if you're not perceptive of it immediately, or even if you're never wholly perceptive of it, even if it's never truly salient in your mind. That's still reality. That's still reality that's unhealthy for you, and it causes the fraying of the social fabric. And people exist as part of a larger superorganism, and I don't think that we're actually individual atoms. I think we're all cells in a larger racial body, a body that organizes itself through states, and it organizes itself with certain systems having priority. Like in the human body, the different systems are subordinated to the nervous system in the brain, and I think that similarly, there needs to be an aristocratic class, and I think that this aristocratic class needs to take the place of the brain in administrating what the lower classes have to do. That's not necessarily evil or exploitative, and I think that empowering the lower classes to do basically whatever they want, that's a recipe for disaster and long-term mental instability and unhealth. Moreover, any society that imbibes this sort of libertarian ideology and really digests it and puts it into practice, even people are not totally mentally unwell, I would still posit that they would be unwell compared to if they were organized in more of a fascistic, aristocratic sort of fashion. They're totally going to be blown the fuck out by any organism, superorganism, any other race that does organize itself according to collectivist principles, because they're going to have a larger, stronger body that is oriented towards success in a way that the scattered individualistic non-societies of the West are not. That's my take on the situation. Don't get me wrong. I think that the elites, I'm not entirely sure how to solve the problem of corruption in the elites, but I don't think the answer is individualistic libertarianism. I think that
I'm not actually proposing a plan of action based on my new suspicion of power, because I think that power is going to be here whether we like it or not. There's nothing that libertarians can do about state power, because at the end of the day, whether a society is places more power with the state or places more power with the people is determined entirely by the technology available. When weapons are available that normal people can easily use and train themselves to use, you're just naturally going to get a system that grants more power to the lower classes. But when technology is, when weapons technology is that weapons are more specialized and require more training and use, you're going to get a system that places more power with the government. There's nothing that libertarians can do about that. That's just how it will always be.
Honestly, I feel like a lot of
I also think we need to be a little more careful and a little nuanced when describing individuals as cells in a greater racial body, and because I feel like that idea is embodied very well in China, and I think it can be taken to an extreme where you are just seen as a cog in the machine, and you do your job every day, and you're not allowed to think any thoughts outside of your factory job. And just keep in mind that it's all for the greater glory of China. And maybe that's true. Maybe China is more powerful for acting like that, but I certainly wouldn't want to live in China, and I wouldn't want the average European to live like that. So I think we could be a little more, I don't know, we need to flesh that idea out better, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think it's because the type of cells that we are in a society are not one-to-one with the type of cells that are in our body. Because if a cell is not healthy, it's not doing its job properly. And existing in that sort of a Chinese state is not healthy for the type of cells that we are. The type of cells that we are have different requirements from a cell that's in a human body. And that means a family life and something that is fulfilling. And so I wouldn't say that the Chinese system is one-to-one. I think it's a matter of, it's like, how do I phrase this? We give people enough recreation time. We give people enough family time, not as a gift of efficiency, not just to oil the machine, but for moral reasons itself that are rooted ultimately in religion and spirituality. But I think that it's like there are certain cells in the human body that require oxygen and certain nutrients as fuel, but our fuel requirements are different on the macro scale, and that's kind of the resolution of it. It's like why are we pushing for the success of the state in the first place? Because the success of the state represents a paradigm of health and vigor and success for the organism, like the organisms that comprise it, and par for that course includes health and happiness on a local level. It's not, because if you look at it like China does, if you look at it merely as a scientific exercise, at the end of the day, you wind up with something that's sort of like a bottom line, for a corporation's bottom line. You want to look at the health of a corporation. You can conceive of corporations as superorganisms, and at the end of the day, if they're doing well, their bottom line is good, and they're selling lots of products. But that's not the kind of health that I'm talking about. Like, I don't really know how to phrase this, but it's like, yeah, we need the overall, we need the superorganism to be healthy, we need the superorganism to be successful, but that's a holistic venture. It's not just see at the end of the day, I'm not asking people to sacrifice everything about their lives. I'm not saying you need to give up your happiness for this arbitrary conception of success of some larger entity, some larger organism, some corporation or some state or whatever. That's not the point unto itself. Basically, it's saying that we do have a larger reality to us. We do have a larger racial, cultural, statist reality to us. But the point is the point in recognizing that is to give you purpose in your local life, in your local level of existence. We say we need to serve the state because that's a good thing, and buried sort of within that statement is this assumption that that's actually what you need to be oriented towards for satisfaction in life. It's duty partly, But it's also, the reason we say that is to, I think, that is to give people this idea that that's what they're meant to be doing, and that leads to happiness and satisfaction. I don't want to run people into the ground just to chase numbers. That's not right. The idea here. That's part of it, but it needs to be flush with soul. It needs to be flush with human understanding. It's like, you understand, we're not running the state just to run the state. We're not running the state efficiently just to run the state efficiently. We're doing that because we're saying that in doing so, that's how you derive real purpose and real satisfaction. So it would be to defeat the whole point. It would be to defeat the whole purpose if you were just to say, well, you need to think of nothing but your factory job. That's not, we're not doing that as an end unto itself. We're saying that to derive real satisfaction, there has to be a corporate effort so that you can really feel satisfied when you come home. When you come home from China into your little shoebox apartment after working all day, there is no satisfaction. But when you come home, to your bit of land that you own in the Third Reich after working at the Volkswagen factory all day, you feel like you've contributed to everyone around you. You feel like you have purpose in your life. You feel like you have... Did you see kind of where I'm going with this? There's more of a rootedness and an animation and a light.
This is a problem that comes with technological society is everything being boiled down to the numbers, and we have to know the numbers on everything, and efficiency becomes an end in and of itself, and so all activity throughout your day is towards this goal of maximizing efficiency. And when you think about power and organizing a society from that standpoint, from the standpoint of the machine of technological society and numbering everything and maximizing efficiency, it becomes very inhuman, and it loses all its soul. It's hard to envision a future in which we fix this problem and technological society sticks around. Like, technological society, as it's conceived of today, has to go.
Yeah, definitely. It's like this is an argument that socialists make all the time. Is that people instinctively want to help each other, and that is true, and that is actually what we're going for. We're not running the state to run it. That's not the point. That's not the be all. That's not the end all. Our entire argument is that our satisfaction as people comes from a corporate collective effort, not a libertarian effort, but that we're not doing it unto itself. We're doing it because we need to, because that's part of our soul. It's part of our psyche. Taking that to the extreme where it's stripped of everything is pointless. It's literally meaningless. Just doing it for its own sake is stupid. The whole reason we're investing this effort, the whole reason we're taking rights away in some sense, is for the greater good. we're not being inhuman. What a libertarian might conceive of as being inhuman or violating people's rights just for fun. We're not doing that just for no reason, as some kind of a weird art project or something. It's because it's immensely satisfying to the human soul when things are oriented properly. That's the point. So it's not, I would disagree with the characterization that, we're going to wind up with some sort of Chinese bug style super state where everything is stripped of meaning and value. The Chinese probably are more prone to that sort of thing anyway, because I do think they're just more insectoid. I just think that they have a tendency to organize themselves like ant colonies, and they probably don't even need the type of mental stimulation and sense of purpose and sense of accomplishment that we do. We as Europeans are a more artistic people. Don't get me wrong, the Chinese have their cultural vanguard, their cultural elite among them, but the average person over there is just willing to work in a way that the average European is not. And then that was even true during imperial time.
Europeans more than any other people on the planet demand a constant rising in their standard of living. And I think that's why the elite hate us in particular, is because we expect the wealth to be shared.
I think that the Chinese people would be the ultimate workforce for the Jewish technocrats, the Jewish overlords. I think that an insectoid race of people like that would be that's a Jewish wet dream. Is that they couldn't conceive of a better world where they run everything, and they live off of basically a state of a billion Chinese gray aliens, insectoid worker drone robots that just cater to their every need. That is the Jewish fantasy. Maybe that's why they work so well with the Chinese.
Unfortunately, there is a subsection of Chinese people who they do have their aristocracy. Those are, people like Xi Jinping are in the way of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's never accurate or fair to color an entire race with a single stroke. You know what I mean? Like, there are trends that are true, and there are always exceptions. So generally, it's true that Chinese people are kind of like insects.
You do have these group selected traits that manifest themselves because it's beneficial for the group as a whole. That some people have these traits, and not everybody have these traits. So you do have the subsection of Chinese who become the cultural aristocracy and are there defending the Chinese people from subversion and infiltration and being taken advantage of by technocratic elites.
Yeah.
Kind of. Yeah. I mean, they are the technocratic elites over there, but in the
I do think that the archaeo-futurist thing is the way to go, though. We have to dismantle technological society, and our purpose as a species needs to be to pursue cultural endeavors at a low tech level across the stars. A small amount of technology is preserved by a cultural vanguard that seeds us across the stars, as otherwise we pursue the cause of our genetic proliferation and the creation of high culture. And yeah, that's it. Because otherwise, what else are you going to end up with? You're going to end up with some libertarian hell, which is not mentally what we're meant to. It's not mentally healthy for us. Or you end up with a Chinese-style superstate where everything is controlled by technology and is Ted Kaczynski's worst nightmare. We need archaeofuturism. We need to go to the stars. We need Dune.
Yes.
I've never actually even read Dune, so I don't even know if that's a proper reference, but I need to read Dune.
No, you're right. Yeah, Dune is an archaeofuturist story.
Well, I'm glad to be right on the money with that. But yeah, this was initially sort of about World War III and about Russia and the proxies in Armenia and stuff. To be honest, I'm surprised that Russia and Armenia are working together, because I don't think that they like each other, to my knowledge, anyway.
I think Armenia has accepted Russian military equipment.
I mean, it kind of makes sense. They're like in Turkey is a very sort of Persianized country, and Azerbaijan is also very Persian, to my knowledge, and so it makes, and they're both Muslims, so it makes sense that they would work together. Whereas in Armenia, they sort of have a, I guess, they have historic enmity with Turkey, and they're Orthodox Christians. I think they have some doctrinal differences with the Russian church. I actually think that they're not the same church, but the veneer is the same. Like they look very similar, and they're Christian in any case. So I think that probably explains it, regardless of Russia's imperialism. I think any Armenian would accept Russian patronage before Turkish patronage, just given the Armenian genocide and the historical enmity between Christianity and Islam.
So Islam is the dominant religion in both those countries, Azerbaijan and Armenia?
No. The Armenians are Christians.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
And Russia is also obviously Christian, by and large.
Right.
So yeah, I think that honestly, if Russia attacks, I hope that Russia and Turkey go to war, and that there's this crisis moment where Turkey invokes whatever article it is in the NATO charter or whatever, and then just no one responds because no one wants to fight Russia, and that's what gives Russia. I hope that's what happens, because there was a moment a few years ago where Russia shot down some Turkish fighter or vice versa, and there was like a standoff moment or whatever, and nothing ever came of it. But I hope that this dissolves NATO, because NATO is not a good institution. It's gay. And American troops need to get out of Europe, and we need to just let the Russians have their sphere of influence and actually be friends with Russia and their sphere of influence. That's what we need. We don't need this artificially continued Cold War when we have this Chinese threat lurking. Russia and the United States and Western Europe need to just accept things as they are, that Russia is a great power in the region and it's going to have influence. Russia and the West just need to accept that. The U.S. needs to pull its troops out and stop playing this continuation of the Cold War. And we need to have a team up with the entire European world against China. That's what we need to do. And let the Muslims fight amongst themselves. And all of a sudden, Turkey, trying to invoke these articles or whatever, and it totally backfires. And America, Western Europe, and Russia are now staring them down. And that would actually be a good catalyst to dissolve the entire thing and reorient the struggle of the world against China. Let the Middle Easterners squabble amongst themselves. I don't care what happens there. I don't care what Turkey does. I don't care what Iran does. I don't care what Saudi Arabia does or Israel. I don't care. Let them fight amongst themselves. We need to reorient our struggle against China. That's my opinion anyway. We need to be mindful of Israel. I dropped Israel's name there. I think Israel represents a satanic existential threat to the existence of the West based on their rejection of God. And I think that manifests in a very real manner, very demonically. But if we were able to get a handle on that, we need to focus on China, because China represents a threat of a different magnitude and a different type, but it's very real as well. And they're doing things. And it's like, trust me, I get it when alt-right people say, like, they mock people who talk about China, communist Chinese. Like, I get that, because they never focus on Israel. But there's also this fetishization of Israel where everything is secretly Israel. And it's like, that's also not true. That's also misrepresentative. It's like both are threats in different ways. And they cooperate, actually, a lot. So we need to be mindful of China and Israel both. But so long as Israel is contained, and so long as the flow of money and political support to Israel stops, we can focus on China, which is a much larger country with a lot of resources on its own.
Yeah, I'm about to make Wignats really mad here, because I'm going to take the full Alex Jones pill, but it's not exclusively the Jews that are the problem. Okay, there's a lot of goys involved. It's a technocrat problem. It's a Jewish problem. It's a Freemason problem. It's a Vatican problem. There are so many factions at play here working together to destroy us.
I think at the end of the day, it does go back to the Jews, but it's a beast that's grown beyond their sole control. Like, you look at communism, for example. I would agree with the thesis that says that communism is Jewish. I believe in the Judeo-Bolshevism theory. And I believe, I remember looking this up, there was a Rockwell speech where some communist sympathizer in his audience asked him about if communism is Jewish, how do you explain China? And Rockwell didn't have a good answer to this because it wasn't well known at the time. But I looked it up later, and sure enough, Jewish involvement in the rise of communism in China was pronounced. So I believe that the Jews created communism and proliferated communism, including in China. And I believe that the Jews created Freemasonry, and that they spread Freemasonry throughout the entire world. I actually believe that explains the Anglo phenomenon as well, because I was actually reading up on the history of Freemasonry, and apparently it traveled to England by way of King Athelstan. And I was like, oh, well, that explains the Anglo problem. Since the foundation, it's been corrupted by Jewish Freemasonry. So they're at the root of the Freemasonic problems. And this sort of confluence and mixture of Masonic and Bolshevik, that is Jewish ideals in the Catholic Church, led to all sorts of problems with the Jesuits, and directly led to the Vatican II heresies. Right. So I think at the end of the day, it does go back to the Jews. But
yeah,
I would say
this shouldn't be surprising. This shouldn't be surprising to anybody. I mean, we have a trend for going back thousands of years of two types of people. People who are more open in their displays of their power, the Europeans, and then people who have always dealt in secrecy and infiltration, and that would be the Jews. This shouldn't be surprising to anybody.
Yeah, it's like people want to say, "Oh, you think it's all the Jews?" And it's like, yeah, but we're also acknowledging the fact that it's gone beyond them. The Chinese Communist Party it's not a Jewish party, but we're also identifying the fact that the Jews cause problems. They plant seeds, and these seeds grow, and it's like throwing a seed bomb. The Jewish fist throws the seed bomb, and then the weeds grow on their own and cause their own damage. So we have to stop these Jewish prime movers. And actually, I think that kind of getting back to this whole thing. That's why I think that the lizard insult, like when you say the lizards run the world, I actually think that that's truer than people know, because like it's kind of a dry conspiracy theory if you just want to say there happens to be another planet out there where evolution took a different path, and to our eyes they look like the animals we classify as reptiles, and they're secretly imitating political elites. That's a very dry and almost boring conspiracy theory. It's strictly biological, and it lacks that sort of there's a sense you get when you're talking about something spiritual. You sense that it's richer and deeper and has more dimensions to it, and it's more fleshed out. And I actually think that that's the reality behind the lizard sort of conspiracy theory, because lizard has become a sort of proxy for Jews. David Icke, for example, he was labeled as anti-Semitic because people thought he was using lizard as code for Jews. And it's true, because when you look at people who could be described as lizards, if they're not outright Jewish themselves, they have sort of imbibed, they have partaken of the Jewish communion. They have begun engaging in satanic, that is to say, satanic comes from the devil, and the Jews are in league with the devil because they rejected Jesus Christ. This is very simple. It's simple math to see how Satanism and Judaism are connected. And because you have all these elites that are partaking in these things, and they get there in numerous ways, through Freemasonry, through just being corrupt or whatever, they are now, I guess, Jews sort of by proxy. And what happens is that their soul is literally rotted to the point that it's almost irredeemable, and they become possessed. And now what do you see associated with possession? The demons are frequently described in reptilian terms: the serpent, the snake, the den of vipers, the dragon. These all have reptilian qualities to them. And so when people say you're a reptile, this basically means that you're possessed by demons. And the Jews are the demonic vanguard. They are the satanic revolutionary guard corps. And that is the connection between the Jews and the lizards, because the lizards are not space aliens from some planet. That's too dry, and it lacks that spiritual depth. It's boring, It's just saying, oh, they came down, they wear skin suits. That sounds tin pot, because it kind of is. When you start realizing that the fact that no, these are human beings, but their souls have been rotted to the point that they have no agency anymore, and they're vessels for demonic possession. That explains it. And then you just go. It's very easy from there to see. Oh, okay, well, the Jews and the demons are connected because the Jews, reject Jesus Christ. And there's no better way to sum it up, in my opinion, than just to say the Jews are the vanguard of the satanic revolution. They are the satanic revolutionary guard corps. That's how I sum it up. And that explains the collaborator problem. That explains the Anglo problem. At the end of the day, they are lizards. If I was ever president of the United States, I would have no problem calling people lizards. I'd be like Trump with the journalists, but instead of calling them fake news, I'd just point out and say, you lizard, you from CNN, the brood of vipers, and stuff like that. That's the reptilian conspiracy. It says they're not reptiles from some star. They're demons. These are human beings who are possessed by demons, who have traditionally been represented by reptiles in art: vipers, snakes, serpents, dragons, frogs. That's the explanation, in my opinion. That's the lizard conspiracy.
Yeah, the history of the battle between Europeans and these secret societies is displayed in art, and it's symbolized by serpents and eagles. We're the eagles, they're the serpents. That's how it is.
Yeah, it's definitely true. It's I mean, it also makes you wonder, like, to what degree the Chinese are, because the Chinese state is very atheistic, and I wonder if they're almost sort of if they're intending to be a third faction, and they're just utilized, because if you're not with God, you're against God. So it's no question that the demons are using China, but are they conscious of it in the way that maybe a Jeff Bezos is conscious of it, or some of these elites who go to the Bohemian Grove or whatever? Like, I don't know how the Chinese actually play into this whole spiritual dimension.
I think they're so I think they're so culturally alien to this very, very Christianized metaphysical battle that they might think it's just total utter nonsense. They see the Western world as fighting this Christian versus Luciferian battle, and they're like, I don't want anything to do with that. I just want to be China.
Yeah, well, they can't escape from it though, because the domain of the spiritual is everywhere. So I think I would agree with you. I think that they don't think that they're a part of it, but I think that they're unwitting pawns. like they're being used in a roundabout way by demonic entities and demonic factions. This is why it's so true. Like when people say, Wignats get upset when someone says that the Democrats are working with China, and they get upset in two ways. First of all, even using the word Democrat, they think that's a surrogate word for something else, Jews or blacks or whatever. And then China is obviously, they think that's a surrogate or a scapegoat instead of the Jewish problem. But it's really true. It's like these demonic entities. This is the explanation: is that in China, the demons have an opportunity to hurt white Western Christian civilization, and so they take it. The Chinese don't have to be conscious of it for them to be used in that way. And the way it's funny because I'm saying the Chinese are being used, but a lot of the times it looks as if the Chinese are using the West. You know what I mean? It's like, because everything is ultimately in the service of the demons. I would say China is being used, even though it looks a lot of the time like people in the West, business leaders, political leaders, are selling out to China. In the grand scheme of things, it's actually the opposite. It's just that tactically, on a practical level, on a way where you look up and you see what appears to be going on, it looks like it's the opposite. So
yeah,
that's kind of what I think, anyway.
Yeah.
So
I never feel like I have a good take on Russia because it's very difficult for me to see what exactly their relationship is to the neoliberal elite in the West. Because it seemed like for a long time towards the end of the Soviet Union, there were a lot of these pushes being made to kind of join the elite of the two countries, of the Soviet Union and the United States. There were a lot of things being done to culturally unify. Reagan signed a treaty with them that basically unified the two countries' education systems. This was and policy towards the Soviet Union, especially in Europe, but also in the United States, in the decades leading up to the collapse of the Soviet Union, were aimed at the long-term plan being more, conceding ideological territory to the Soviets to pave the way for a future globalist world where the Soviet Union wasn't a military threat to the West, but more of an ally. Sort of just part of the general globalist dream of unifying the entire world under a single atheistic economic system. But ever since the Soviet Union collapsed, I don't know if that split happened the way that we see it in the media. Like, I don't know I don't think we were ever going to go to war with the Soviet Union because the globalist elite in the West wanted to concede ground to them and break down these barriers. But now, I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't know if Russia has backed out of that globalist ideal.
I don't know. I think a lot of what they do is not so big and scary. I think a lot of it is very practical. I do believe that the social conservatism of Putin is real. I do believe that he is a nationalist. I don't think that he's an ultra-nationalist. I think that he has practical visions for the ethnic minorities in his country, but I do believe that he is a nationalist. I think that that's not in doubt. And I think that he does sort of foment issues in the West because the West is not looking to be an ally with him. They're looking to stifle him, stymie him, oust him from office, kind of ostracize him from the global community. So I think that his designs on the world are a lot more practical and low level. I don't think that he's so engaged in this spiritual battle because I feel like he's just a smaller player. Like he probably is probably nationalist and communist groups in the West both get Russian money. I would not be surprised if the Russian government was funding nationalist dissent in the West. I just wouldn't be surprised. It is a good way to divide the country. We agree. We come to this position ideologically where we look at the West and we look at the United States, whatever, and we say there are problems here, and the Russians capitalize on that. But at the end of the day, our interests saying we need to reform the West and Russia's interest in weakening the West, they kind of align. So I think
Russia funds both sides. I mean, I
Pardon?
shared that post. I definitely think Russia funds both sides in the West. I shared that post in the group chat a couple days ago about how the Russian government funds both extremes in their own country, and then like makes people aware that they are funding both extremes to kind of like make it unclear to people who they can trust, who is actually fighting the system and who is actually receiving money from the system. It's pretty smart. I don't like it. It's kind of creepy, but it's smart.
I think that I think that the Soviet Union became, I think that the Jewish, so there have been several camps of Jewish power. There's several thoughts in the Jewish psyche to getting what they want. They all have different visions at the end of what they want, and they have a similar sort of thread through all of them, but all the visions are slightly different, and they have different ways of achieving them. And there are four, like, people are always surprised when I tell them the Jews are not a hive mind. You wouldn't believe the amount of backlash they get from some people from saying this, but I'm like, dude, they have a parliament in Israel. They have elections in Israel. They disagree with one another all the time. But I identify sort of four main camps of Jewish subversion. There's capitalist subversion, where they just want to be an elite through the accumulation of capital, and that's sort of what we see in the West. That's sort of the globalist mentality. And then there is the Zionist, more directly, sort of camp, and they want the state of Israel, and they want territorial gains, and they resemble us in a lot of ways. So they have, like, they're imperialistic, and they're often tied with the capitalist or the liberal Jews, but they're not 100% the same thing. Because I'm talking very specifically about like the IDF and people in Israel who want greater Israel.
The Jewish National Socialists, Jignats.
Yeah, Jignats. And these people are distinct from the people who want to live in the great cities of the world.
Netanyahu supporters.
Yeah, this is distinct from people who want to live in New York, and they want to live in London, and they want to live in Paris. They work together a lot of the times because they're not mutually exclusive, but functionally they're different camps. And then you have two that are basically opposed to each other, and the other groups as well. You have the Orthodox Jews, like the ultra-Orthodox Jews that are against Zionism, and they live in their own little communities, and they don't associate with the rest of the world. People with the long side locks, and these are the ultra.
Yeah, the ultra Orthodox Jews are interesting because they're not really invited into the global control system. Because they're their own faction. Yeah,
they believe all the things.
They're kind of seen as a problem to normal Jews because they're so bad optics for them. But at the same time,
they're protesting Zionism.
Yeah, at the same time, your more secularized Jews in Israel and in the diaspora still defend these ultra-Orthodox Jews. And if you attack ultra-Orthodox Judaism, they'll come at you and they'll say, that's a Jewish problem that we discuss in our community. It's not for you to talk about.
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, they will work together if they feel like their interests overlap and align. But I'm still kind of like, they will do that, but that's because they wish everyone else in their community would follow their path. They have a prescription to solve what they see as the problems of the Jewish community. They have a prescription for getting to their version of the Promised Land, and it differs from the rest of their fellow Jews. When there's an outside attack, they will fall together as a single unit because they're all vying for control of the Jewish population, and so that kind of explains that. But at the end of the day, you see the Orthodox Jews, they protest Zionism. They don't participate in the global control structures. They're certainly not communists. These are people who are religious, and their views. I mean, it's fairly obvious when you're talking about Zionism what their views are for controlling power. It's your basic imperialism. They are just nationalists for themselves. When you look at the capitalists, it's also pretty obvious. They want to control the reins of other countries through banking, through capitalism, through direct political control and seizure of legislatures and judiciaries and things like that.
Yeah,
that's more obvious.
To be clear, ultra-Orthodox Jews aren't like based. These aren't people that you should ally with. They're
that's what I'm going with.
They're alien and weird, and they colonize sections of cities, and nobody around them likes them.
That's where I'm going with people. This. Is that their prescription is religious. They think that there's going to be spiritual intervention for them. So they're not interested in grabbing the levers of power themselves. They're not interested in being Zionist. They believe all the same things. They are superior and all these things, but they believe the Messiah is going to deliver to them, Gentile slaves. They believe that God will intervene for them, and their prescription is much more mystical. It's much more religious, and that's why they're not so invested in seizing control in the physical world, because they think the spiritual world is going to intervene for them. That's the third camp, and obviously the last camp would be the communistic camp, and this camp has their own sort of version as well. They believe in the destruction of everything, sort of similar to how the neoliberals sort of believe these things, but instead of just administrating from the top down as a ruling class, they believe that they'll be able to advance their own interests through the destruction of everything else. They can assure their own security by dissolving everything else and dissolving everybody else's sense of identity, of race, of these sorts of things. And that's how and a lot of the times this manifests to them being commissars and being involved in the socialist or communist political system. But at the end of the day, they want to basically assure their ascendance, not by rising up, whether that's through religious avenues, because a lot of them don't actually even believe in God, obviously, and they don't want to rise through capitalistic means. They want to bring everybody else down to the point where they're totally deracinated, and the Jewish spirit and the people can be preserved through just the destruction of everything else. And there's obviously sub-factions within all these. The best example of this would be in the communist system. Some people believe in being commissars. Some people believe in establishing a little autonomous zone for Judaism within a larger sort of Soviet-esque state. And others believe that everything should just be destroyed, and that the best way to live, the way to live Judaism to the fullest extent is to revolt and to undergo world revolution and spiritual revolution to the point that everything else is rendered almost Jewish, like to the point where they don't have to separate themselves, but everything is just in such rebellion against God that it's almost made Jewish by proxy, that everyone else is almost turned into a sort of Jew. And
that's neoliberalism.
No, I'm talking specifically about the hard sort of Trotskyite Marxism, and that's distinct from neoliberalism. Neoliberalism wants to render the world in service to I guess capitalistic elites. Everybody shares these Jewish ideals, but the Jews are at the top still administering things.
Well, wasn't it Trotskyism that morphed into neoconservatism in the 90s?
I no.
Yeah, there was a faction of communism. It might not be Trotskyism, but there was a faction of communism that basically morphed into neoconservatism.
That's news to me. I've never heard of that before.
Well, it's something worth looking into. I'll look into it for you.
Yeah, because I think that the communist Jews, they have the widest. I would call them a single faction, but I'd say that there's the most diversity of thought within their faction, and some of it can mimic neoliberal thought quite similarly, and some of it is quite dissimilar. But I would still classify them as a single group. And those are the four main groups of Jews that I would posit exist in the world: the Zionists, the ultra-Orthodox, the capitalists, and the communists. And that's sort of what I believe in. You could argue that there are other aspects as well, but I would, like, for example, I would lump Freemasons in with, I wouldn't call them the ultra-Orthodox because they're not, but I would kind of put them under the same religious umbrella because they're using spiritual means to corrupt people. But a case could also be made for them to fit under the sort of the capitalistic umbrella, if you actually look at what Freemasonry is, what it believes, what it promotes. So it's some of these things are difficult to classify, but the four main groups of Jewish thought I would say are capitalism, communism, ultra-Orthodox, which is the smallest. The ultra-Orthodox are obviously the smallest, and then Zionism. And that's kind of my analysis of the Jewish sphere of influence in the Jewish sphere of reality. And as you'll notice, I think you'll see that their end games are all slightly different, and their visions for the bulk of the Jewish people are all slightly different. None of them would have, and this is how you know that they're a single. That at the end of the day, they're different visions for a single group, is because if every other Jew in the world that wasn't ultra-Orthodox became ultra-Orthodox, the ultra-Orthodox would accept them. And the same thing is true of neoliberals. If the great bulk of the rest of the world's Jews could be convinced into the neoliberal, the capitalistic sort of way of doing things, they would basically be accepted with open arms, because they see themselves as a single group. It's political parties within the Jewish soul that are vying for control, and they all have a slightly different version of the end game of where they're going.
Right.
So,
they're all working towards their vision of what is good for the Jewish people.
Yeah. There's not a singular unified
Europeans
Jewish vision.
who are not allowed to think of themselves as a people.
Yeah. And a lot of Wignats make the mistake of lumping all Jews together. And a lot of Wignats really do believe that Jews have a sort of hive mind, and it's not true. They have an ethnic sense. That's not the same as being a hive mind.
Right.
Well, I have some work to do, actually, so I don't know how long this has been. If it's been shorter than usual, unfortunately, we're going to have to cut it short, but I think we actually got a lot done in this conversation.
Yeah, it was good considering we didn't have a real plan going in, but we'll have something more to talk about next week, and for sure the week after we'll get into Imperium. Yeah,
that's something that we can cover for sure, because I'm going to order that book, and hopefully it gets here quickly, and I'll start reading it and all that
you
stuff.
You can find a PDF online while you wait. But
oh, okay, great. But yeah, I'm actually very satisfied with this conversation, because we talked about Russia, we talked about dissolving NATO, we talked about China, we talked about lizards, we talked about Jews, so... And it all kind of made sense. It all kind of flowed. So I'm very happy about that. So
yeah.
All right. Well, I'll talk to you later.
We'll talk
then.
next week. See ya.
All right. Bye.
Sunrise.